But this is a train wreck.
Welcome to Decoding TV's coverage of Pluribus Season 1, Episode 8. I'm David Chen here with Patrick Klepek. I'm getting over the flu, so I might sound a little bit different today on this week's podcast. But a lot to discuss in this episode. A lot of plot developments, Patrick. The plot, for a while, no plot developments. Now they're coming fast and furious. What did you think overall of this episode?
I really like this episode of Pluribus. I sometimes with big prestige shows like this, the penultimate episode is what we would normally consider the season finale, in which a lot of major cliffhanger events occur, and then the final episode of the season is sort of sitting with that and moving on to the next season. It does not appear that Pluribus is going to be like that. I'm still expecting a big series of events and cliffhangers to occur in the broader story, and it seems like if that is going to happen and has been teased that it's going to happen, that is going to happen in the proper finale. But this episode, I'm so deeply curious to hear what you think of it, because I, once again, no shock, loved it. I continue to sit with this show as one of the most thoughtful explorations of loneliness in an age of loneliness. That is often talked about in the context of a epidemic of male loneliness, which is true and toxic and very bad, has many consequences for men, women, and everyone in between. But we live in a social media age in which technology has, in theory, broken down barriers to allow us to communicate and be with one another in ways that should bring us closer. And yet, I think most people would describe themselves as further apart from many of the people in their lives. And I think Pluribus ends up being this really thoughtful, interesting exploration of what does it mean to be lonely? What does it mean to be alive? What does it mean if you had everything at your fingertips? What is the point of any of it? And I think this episode, although one could argue it is essentially Stockholm Syndrome and could be seen as a form of abuse by the hive, I think in totality, it's a show about loneliness, what it means to be alive. And I'm really enjoying that in the context of what is otherwise an alien invasion show. And I still don't know where this show is going. When we talk about it could be for 4 seasons, I go, how? But I'm excited to see the shape of where this show might be going, and I'm thoroughly enjoying the journey along the way.
I got to say, I was a big fan of this episode as well.
All right. David liked the episode.
Yes. I actually thought it was very beautiful, particularly the ending of the episode. And just the thing about watching Pluribus is it's about a very fantastical situation, like a very otherworldly situation that many of us will probably never encounter, which is the entire rest of the world is joined to a massive hive mind and we're not part of it, right? Like
God willing, David, check back in a couple of years. Pluribus season 4. Okay, so season 4 is airing, made by the hive mind, but they tapped into what Vince wanted to do in the show, and they shot it anyway.
But even though we won't encounter that situation for real, there's many aspects of our real life that we can kind of read into this fantastical situation. I mean, I'll just say as an example, Zosia reuniting with Carol at the beginning of this episode, or towards the beginning of the episode, it's almost like you took a break with your girlfriend or something, right? Like, I don't know if you've ever been in that situation where you've taken a break and then you decide to come back together again, and it's very awkward, and you don't know how to talk to them, and you don't know how to begin acknowledging all the stuff that's gone, so that's it. It's not the movie. The show is not about taking a break from your ex, but it's you can kind of read that awkwardness into the situation, and there's other things in this episode as well that I think you could kind of apply your own life or overlay your own life onto, and I really appreciate that. In my opinion, that makes it a rich text. And yeah, I think the stuff that happens with Carol this episode, again, all I'm asking for is some character development, and I do think we get it, and I think it's very impressive and moving in this episode. So let's talk about it. Before we begin, I do want to acknowledge that some people did comment about the fact that last week's episode, Carol takes a painting from Georgia O'Keeffe and puts it in her house. Many people have noted that this is a belladonna, a painting of a belladonna flower, which is a deadly nightshade. and that her, this painting may represent what Carol is attempting to do in this episode, which is like, appear appealing to these people, but then like ultimately try and appear appealing to the hive mind, and ultimately try to kind of poison them from within, or destroy them from within. And I do think we get some evidence of that this episode. So I just want to acknowledge the significance of that Georgia O'Keeffe painting. But let's get into it. So I do want to just remind folks that when we last left off with Carol, like last episode, it was 48 days post the joining. Okay, so that becomes important later in this episode. Manousos Oviedus is in a hospital after the hive has tried to save his life. And he is really unhappy that the hive is taking care of him, and he asks what he owes for the bill. He learns that before the joining, this would have cost $8,277.53 in either Balboas or American dollars, and that's when he realizes he's in Panama. So he then commandeers an ambulance, and then flees and heads towards Carol. I like that when he had the itemized bill, he wrote like all this shit plus ambulance. He's very not fastidious, conscientious. Like he really wants to keep track of everything that he's doing. So I admire that.
Both these actors in this show do a lot with their face that is really like, I feel like part of the reason you cast actors like this in a show is you need actors that can convey a lot without saying a lot. And that's something that Ray Seahorn does really well. That's something that the actor portraying Manousos does really, really well, is like when he wakes up and his eyes bulge and the camera changes focus to the knife. Like, it explains, between those two things, explains so much about he feels. Am I glad I'm alive? Yes. Also no. Also
right.
Yes. But maybe I should stab this guy in the neck. And he just brings him out so that he can itemize the bill. But it's just,
it's very funny that everyone is very cheerful too, because they have to be while he's holding them hostage.
Yeah,
I thought that was a nice touch.
It was great, and it's just his, slow roll into this show. I think like many slow rolls that are happening over the first season of Pluribus, I think will be satisfying, even if some of that satisfaction is going to clearly happen in the next season of the show. We're just running out of time for him to be super present, despite the fact that I think he will be a really important player in the finale. But the show it's playing its cards slowly, and like this is a moment that is like really important for the character, and I'm enjoying learning about him through his actions.
You did predict that we wouldn't get like a uniting of Manousos and Carol until the end of the season, and I think that is. Let me put it this way: I'll be shocked if that doesn't happen that way.
Yeah.
So I did want to acknowledge some of Manousos' comments from last week's episode of the show, where he essentially said, "You don't own anything." Like when he's burning the car, right? He says like, "You don't own this. You're like, how dare you take any of this? It's not yours." And some people did point out the parallel between that and AI. Like if you take the hive as a kind of AI avatar, right? Like this kind of thing that represents AI. That's yet another thing that could represent. Manousos is obviously doing it. He wants everything to be human. Everything is human done. And so he's like, you don't own this. And it's kind of like many people who are against AI or say like, obviously AI is built off of certain models are built off of a lot of debatably stolen material. And so anyway, I just thought that was an interesting parallel that people mentioned. I wanted to make sure I discussed it briefly here on this podcast. Zosia and Carol meet up. We pick up like right after the final moments of the last episode, but Carol doesn't really know what to say. So they decide to play a game instead, like a card game. They talk about the different games and how they would be appropriate or not. Like bananagrams wouldn't make sense because Zosia knows all the words, and Risk about total world domination feels awkward.
A lot of word games, Scrabble, like just those become pretty pointless to play with a supercomputer on the other side.
Chess, it would not be a good idea. So they decide to play the card game known as Spit, which I think is funny because Spit is obviously a huge part of how the hive / joining occurred in the first place. But anyway, they have a nice afternoon, and Carol asks, "Is everyone back now?" And Zosia says, "It should be another hour or two." By the way, I wanted to acknowledge that every time that drone appears on screen, it's like a very funny visual gag. You know, the drone that tried to get her trash and is still like hanging there. Yeah, it's very fun. It's very funny that they just, like kept that there. Anyway, she asks where they sleep at night, and she learns that many of them are staying at the Rio Ranch Event Center because it saves on more electricity and it's more efficient to cool one big room than many small ones. So then she goes to visit the Rio Ranch Event Center. And then she says, "This isn't going to turn into that orgy scene at the end of that Matrix movie, is it?" And I just have to say, weird thing to say, Carol, because clearly the orgy scene that happens in the Matrix Reloaded happens in the middle of the film, not at the end. So, like,
Jesus.
I think Carol needs to brush up on her Matrix quadrilogy knowledge, is what I have to say about that.
I do like, though, that Zosia says, like, unless you want it to.
Unless you wanted to, right. That's an option. If they're willing to give her an atom bomb, they're willing to orchestrate an orgy for
you want them to all have sex? Like that? We can make that happen. Does that make you happy, Carol?
Yeah. We learn a few things, right? Like they all sleep next to each other. Also, a dog comes up to them. And they don't have pets, but when a dog doesn't want to separate from its owner, they'll take care of the pet. And
isn't the implication there that there's been theories over the animals? Do they have a collective, like, species level hive mind, right? Like, do the dog? And my takeaway from this was no. The animals actually maintain instinctual free will as creatures, and they are not act like it. The buffalo aren't going as the buffalo go. The dogs, right? Which is actually kind of, you know.
Well, we had
sad.
speculated it earlier, right? Because as a listener wrote in and speculated, like, do all the coyotes have their own hive mind?
Right.
Because they seem to be acting in concert in that episode. But it does seem clear that animals are kind of operating of their own volition and are not part of some hive mind in the show. So my guess is that'll probably become important at some point, but we'll see. Anyway, Carol decides to sleep with the hive, which is a big step for her.
In multiple ways this episode, David. Huh?
What'd you say?
In multiple ways.
Yeah.
Anyway,
that's right.
Continue.
That's true. Yeah, no, I just got it.
You're sick. You're sick. You know, it's
yeah,
gonna
I'm
take
not
a
feeling
minute.
well. And she says, we had she drives home with Zosia, and Zosia says, "We had a wonderful time with you. We're very happy to be back." Carol goes inside, immediately opens up the whiteboard, and starts like resuming her quest. She writes like "they eat people" and underlines it on the board, showing that she has not yet given up on her mission to save humanity from the hive. Now,
or reminding herself, right? I think I think one can make the argument over the course of this episode that sure, maybe she is trying to become sort of infiltrate the hive and find a way to plant a bomb or a poisonous flower from within. But also she's allowing herself in an extraordinary situation to indulge, right? Like feel connection. Like I don't think every action that is occurring is the result of a Mission Impossible plot to take down the hive. I think she's trying to remind herself as she struggles with the lack of human contact and intimacy of the ultimate mission at hand. Yeah. Like maintaining her sanity is like good mental health is a part of being able to accomplish it. And I think
part of taking down the hive. Associating with them so she doesn't go insane is important in order to be able to take them down. I have some more to say about this momentarily, but Carol and she already knew they eat people from weeks ago, right? So she's just kind of like restarting. She's like, okay, I'm reminding myself that I need to pay attention to this. Anyway, Carol and Zosia start spending a lot of time together. They go on these kind of dates. They play croquet together. They look at trains together. And during one of these dates, Zosia reveals that the hive communicate using the body's electromagnetic field, like radio. She says, quote, "Our communication is unconscious, homeostatic, like breathing," end quote. Now, you will recall that Manousos Oviedos was listening to every single radio frequency, and they were all empty except one. Is it possible that radio frequency is how the hive communicates, and that we're going to see them attempt to disrupt that frequency?
Yes.
Time will
Yes.
tell.
Yes. Yes. The show is screaming. The show is like, yes. What doesn't happen in the finale? I don't know. But increasingly, I'm believing, what if you could sever that connection between the hive?
Right.
It would not necessarily, I don't think it would necessarily create an unjoining, right? Like, I don't know that everyone gains back their individuality, but I do think you could sever the connection, and like, what would happen?
I'm going to predict, I have not, I swear to God, I have not seen the final episode
We
of the show.
could. It's the button is sitting right there.
We have, as of this recording, we do not watch ahead. Okay.
No.
But I will tell you, here's my prediction for how season 1 ends.
Okay.
They figure, like, Manusos and Carol join, meet up. He reveals this whole radio thing. They decide to disrupt the radio frequency in their town in New Mexico in a very like small proximity, and like Zosia or whoever's near them wakes up, and then comes unjoined from the hive, and then the final shot / moment is Zosia or whoever else screaming because of how violent the unjoining has been for them. Cut to black. Directed by such and such, created by Vince Gilligan.
I agree. Some version of that, and
that is my prediction.
Well, that was one of my how does Pluribus as a multi-season show go? One of my predictions has been they're going to much sooner than the end of the show figure out localized ways to bring people back, and then it becomes a question of is it who's allowed to do that, and to whom? Who do you bring back? Do people that were in jail before? Do you bring those people? You know what I mean? It starts to become a question of what is if Carol and those who were not affected become essentially kingmakers on rebuilding society. What is the onus and responsibility on them in terms of how they go about doing that? And I suspect that will be, my guess is that's a huge part of the arc of season 2. And I think some version of what you said, it's going to be a version of Hank sitting on the toilet in, I won't get into the context of that, but if you've seen Breaking Bad, you know what I'm talking about. Something like that, which is a scream or a sudden realization on the part of Zosia, etc., that makes you immediately mad that this show will not be back next fall.
Right. I swear on my family's life that I have not seen so this is just pure.
We have speculation. We have not. Now, will David watch this immediately after recording this podcast? Absolutely.
Will I text Patrick in triumph?
An emoji with some sort of mild response that doesn't communicate. It communicates something, but not too much about your feelings on the episode. Yes.
Indeed. You know me so well. Okay. We learn a little bit more about how the hive experiences things. They don't feel everything at once because that would be too much to handle. In the context of getting massages. I also like that every time you see Zosia's back, it still has the scars from when Carol pulled the grenade. I think the show has been very good with continuity overall, and that's another sign. Her back's all fucked up because of Carol's actions from earlier this season.
What I want to say as an aside, one thing I really appreciate about this interpretation of an alien invasion is the fact that those affected by the invasion themselves don't really understand what's going on.
Right.
I'm sure that to some degree it's hard to tell what are they being coy about, and what are they genuinely don't understand. But I err on the side of absent explaining how to undo this, they are more or less being truthful about what they do and do not know about the situation. And it's a fascinating way to do world building where the afflicted are understanding alongside the protagonists of our story what's going on. It's a fun way to dole out information to the audience.
Yeah, we learn a little bit more about what they do and don't know in one of these scenes of their dates. They are at this amazing structure. I've tried to locate the structure. By the way, I've tried to figure out what this thing is. By the time you're listening to this, is probably going to be out there in public. Would love to people let me know in the comments at decodingtv.com or at youtube.com/decodingtv. What is the structure where she's looking out at the stars? Because it looks visually spectacular, I have to say. At this point, Zosia discloses to her that the planet, they are able to see the star of the planet where the signal came from, which is called Kepler 22. around 640 light years away. They can't see the planet, but because planets don't light up, but the planet is Kepler 22b. And she says, we think their planet might be one enormous ocean, twice the diameter of Earth.
I guess this was already a discovered, this is it is believed to be one of the only other Earth-like planets that we have found, going back to 2011.
You're saying in real life?
Yeah, if you look up on Wikipedia, the Kepler 22b, there's a whole, they're pulling from actual beliefs on what we might think would be out there in closest proximity to Earth, which is still obviously very, very far.
Zosha also says, we'll never learn the first thing about them, probably. We love them and we're grateful to them and we will pay it forward. We have to share their gift with whoever else might be out there. This means, and then, Carol writes on her board what she learns, which is they're building a giant antenna and they're going to use all of the world's power to send a signal into space. So at one point, Carol asks for more markers. Zosha asks, does this mean you're writing more chapters of your book? And she says yes, even though she's really just keeping tabs on what's going on with the hive mind. I like that you see people fixing the house that Carol exploded with the fireworks in the background. I thought that was a very nice touch. Anyway.
I have a question. I wonder if this will become a plot point at some point. If you think of the hive as an LLM, one of the problems is what they call the dead internet, which is that LLMs can collapse upon themselves at a certain point because they're just feeding each other invented data when they run out of data to be fed with. Is there a world where, I don't know if she's doing this with the book, but can she feed the hive bad data? They're desperate for new information. They have no new information, right? It's part of why they want the book is they soak up, what's in people's brains, but they already did that. And there's there's no reason to create anything new beyond what is instinctually impulsive, right? Spreading the joining, building the satellite, trying to survive. But there's no reason to create, and yet there's an impulse for them to ingest new things. I wonder if there's a world where she can use something like that against them, and her feeding them papers is maybe just a version of trust, but also is her experimenting with feeding the hive new data that it has been starved of since the joining.
I think it is notable. There have been a lot of questions about what is the hive actually capable of. If you said, "Hey, create me another season of Arrested Development," could they do that? As far as we understand, they do not seem capable of creating any new art. And
she hasn't asked. That's one thing has not been explicitly asked.
But if they are incapable of creating new art, which seems very possible, then that kind of draws the LLM parallels even more cleanly, in my opinion, right? I mean, many people would argue that LLMs or Sora or whatever are creating new art. We can have that debate.
They're wrong. No, they're wrong.
They're wrong.
No, they're wrong. I think that, no. I mean, you can have the debate, but I'm going to say that they're wrong.
Anyway, so Zosha and Carol play croquet together, and Zosha asks her what her best day writing was, and Carol describes going to this diner and working all day so I could write all morning. Those are the best days, she says. And then she realizes, hey, you brought back the waitress from when I used to work here, when I used to write here, from wherever she was. You also rebuilt this diner because it burned to the ground. And she starts getting really upset because she says it's manipulative bullshit because I haven't given up. She accuses the hive of trying to distract her. And as things reach a heated pitch, she and Zosha have sex. The next morning, Carol prints out chapter 1 of the next Waikaro book, and they bond over some of the plot points. We're near the end of the episode. Patrick Klepek, any other thoughts on what's gone on so far, or shall I move to
No, I mean, I think one of the other really important, or perhaps will be important as time goes on, is when Zosha is sort of becoming an important person in her life, part of the daily routine of the house, sort of a partner to some degree, to the extent that she can have one. She keeps trying to get Zosha to say I instead of we. And that even when Zosha acknowledges that and tries to shift to the pronoun change. And there's a very funny crack from Carol, like the smartest person in the world, and you can't handle like changing a pronoun.
Wow. All the brains in the world and you can't navigate a fucking pronoun.
Is really funny, incisive, and insightful. But I do think, like, even if she's having trouble with the changing of how she talks about herself as an individual, there's a very individualistic seeming reaction to the book, even though it may be a collective, but it feels very individualized in the moment. And so that how that was playing out over the course of the episode, I found really interesting, and also just feels like there's a bomb waiting to go off with Minuso showing up and being like, "What the fuck are you?" Like, we've gone on Carol's journey, and
Right.
I think it's very easy to be sympathetic and empathetic to her. Like, all the thetics is very easy.
All the thetics.
But we got to witness her go on this journey, and a giant bucket of cold, full of ice water known as Minusos is like about to be barreling down towards her. And I think it's like someone walking into your house and it's a mess, but it's your mess. And you know where everything's supposed to be. But you do know that if a stranger was to walk in, you wouldn't want to explain it. It would be embarrassing. And I do think there's an element of like the world that Carol has constructed that like it makes sense to her. But the moment any normal person was to walk in, she'd go, okay, like, I know how this looks. Pretty fucked up. Like, yes, I'm having sex with that. Okay, but you have to understand, like, there's so much of that I'm very excited and interested to see how that dynamic plays out once he is introduced into the equation. Because it's hard for me to imagine him putting up with Zosha being around in the house when he gets there. And so I suspect maybe he'll take the house. They got the fireworks shot at it. Yeah. I think he's going to be in the neighborhood. I don't think he's going to be staying at Carol's house.
Well, that does bring me to one parallel for real life that I wanted to mention, which is I'm one of the people that has taken COVID pretty seriously until still, I would agree, actually, still to this day. And I think many people have read in the COVID parallels to what's going on in the show, where it's like everyone's like, "Oh, everything's fine," and then like you, as the person who takes COVID seriously, feels like, "Oh, like I'm in my own world and no one understands anything I'm saying." And there is this scene in the episode where Carol says she has to keep trying to disrupt the joining, even if it means you all leave me again, she says. Even if it means you all leave me again, because like I have to do it. And I think that for many people, I'm not saying for all, taking COVID extremely seriously and like being very serious about what anti-COVID measures you take does eventually collide with wanting to be a social being in this world in some ways. Like, as serious as like we take it, me and my wife, there's other people who like take it even more seriously than us. They're not in a room with other people indoors, even if they're masked, right? Like they won't do it. And I think that what I saw in Carol when she's having this kind of meltdown was this desire to, hey, I want to be part of the social order, but also I can't let go of wanting to undo the joining. And I think many people who, take COVID seriously, in my opinion, kind of go through a similar trade-off where they want to still take care of their health, take care of the health of their loved ones. They think that the impact of COVID is very serious. Long COVID is very serious. And also they want to be a person in this world. And so I was actually very moved by that scene because it's like, it's an impossible trade-off that I think Carol is managing there.
Which
And
I think trade-off is the
yeah.
important part, right? And I think that's going to be part of the tension between Minusos and Carol is that in his eyes, he has not made any trade-offs. The things that have occurred to him are consequences of his actions that were forced upon him.
Yes.
Carol has made trade-offs in an unthinkable scenario in which there's no all winning. Like, it's just figuring out as many people did over COVID, depending on your circumstances, the context,
Right.
the bubbles you made, the people you knew, whether you had, all that stuff was like, no one was, at different degrees of like how they took it seriously in different ways based on the context that was like your individual context.
Right.
And that can and cannot make sense to other people and so I think that's a great parallel and a great conflict that's coming for these two characters.
Because you have somebody who has made some trade-offs and then somebody who has not made any trade-offs, and it's gonna create some problems.
Yeah.
Fast forward to 60 days, 8 hours and 59 minutes or so. So we are now about roughly 2 weeks after the beginning of the episode. It's been a couple weeks since Carol rejoined the hive, and her and Zosia seem to basically be a couple.
Yeah.
They're making breakfast, and Carol asks, what's Zosia's favorite food? And it's this beautiful story. Carolina Wydra, I think, is the name of the actor who plays Zosia, and she does a magnificent job because she's using I, the pronoun, right? And kind of talking. I think when she says, I remember this, I remember that, she is speaking as the person whose body she's inhabiting, or the person whose body the hive is inhabiting, right?
What's weird because it feels like she's still speaking in the third person, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's using the pronoun I, but with distance. And I think but there's a smile that she like puts on her face. It's like,
right.
It's hard. It's like does the hive is it pure data, or do they experience any version of the emotions associated with, like, the way she smiles when she thinks about the food she likes and tells the ice, the story about the ice cream. Does she smile because the emotions bring out like these nostalgic feelings, and that is part of what the hive has access to? Or is it purely just like brainwave memory data that tells, well, we know that I don't know. I think it's an interesting setup for her.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what's so moving to me about this episode is at the very end, it feels like, I'm not saying this is true, but I'm saying it feels like Carol could have just forgotten her whole quest. Like she could have just been like, hey, I can adapt to this new way of living. I can be with this person, even though she's a member of the hive. Like I can move on with my life. And that's something that we want for Carol. And then Zosia's gaze kind of drifts off and she says, you're going to have a visitor. And we see that Manusos is very close to the US border. So he is on his way and he'll probably reach her very soon. And it's kind of like, oh, this peaceful detente is going to end very soon. Anyway, those are some thoughts on this week's episode of Pluribus. Patrick, as we move on, I do want to acknowledge some of the feedback we've gotten, some of the lovely emails we've gotten. Before we do that, I do just want to say, if you want to subscribe to the Decoding TV newsletter for free, you can get Matt Goldberg's wonderful recaps. He's doing a great job of diving into the themes of Pluribus, and so I strongly suggest you subscribe at decodingtv.com. Also, Decoding TV, we do this podcast year-round. We don't just cover shows like Pluribus, we cover other shows as well. If you want to subscribe to this channel or on wherever you get your podcasts, we'd love for you to stay with us as we unpack other shows around the year. Let's talk about this email from Chris, writing in from Commerce, Texas. Now, I'm not going to read the whole email, but Chris predicts that Manusos' Christianity may cause a conflict with Carol's homosexuality. The homosexuality thing may be hard for Manusos to handle. Paraguay is one of only 2 countries in South America that doesn't have gay marriage. Support for same-sex marriage is also low in that country. So that's one thing that I thought was worth mentioning, and who knows if that will create a conflict. Also, Chris writes that some people seem to think that Manusos accepted help by waving at the end of last episode. But Chris says, I don't think he did that. He put his hand up to block the sun, but they are interpreting it as consent for treatment, end quote. So another thing to mention. Patrick, any thoughts on either of those points?
Yeah, he doesn't like talking to them. So we're not gonna get that in. But like I do think this show does establish a set of rules in which they will look for interpretive moments to accomplish the mission of trying to help. So I do buy that from the hive's perspective.
Okay. Diego writes into decodingtv@gmail.com. And Diego is writing from South America. As a mechanical engineer and car mechanic, I wanted to share a few stats on Menuso's journey to the Gap. If we assume he started in Asuncion, the capital of Paraguay, the drive to Chigorodo, which is the last city in Colombia before the Darien Gap, would be about 6,667 kilometers and take him across 6 countries, including Paraguay, Argentina, Chile, Peru, Ecuador, and Colombia. Now, he's talking about the car. An early 70s MG Midget, apparently is the name of the car, which could maintain a constant speed of 90 kilometers per hour. And driving at around 8 hours a day would put his journey at 9 days. But also, if we are extremely generous and give his car an 8 kilometers per liter range with a tank of around 30 liters, it would mean he had to stop 27 times or about 3 times per day in order to fill his car up. If he was able to fill up it every time, and I'm not sure how much gas is on Paraguay, but the entire journey would probably cost him about $1,100 in gas. Anyway, I just thought that was kind of, David Chen, just thought that was kind of interesting stats. I also wanted to ask your opinion on something. As a car mechanic in charge of all nationwide maintenance for electric cars, I'm wondering if we're supposed to make anything about Menusos driving a car older than he is, or that he doesn't seem to use any technology from this millennium. For instance, CRT TVs, wire phones, VHS. Is that an intentional trait, or is he, or is it just a he's from South America and we are all poor down here and eat dirt kind of thing? I think the idea is to make him look more manly and self-sufficient and can do anything by himself, but it just makes him look like an absolute lunatic when he's trying to cross the gap without a map or even a compass, end quote. Patrick, your take on that? I mean, I thought it. I did not feel like Menusos represented the global South's possession of technology. You know, I thought it was like specific to the Menusos character. But yeah, any thoughts on this?
Well, I agree with you that is not the intent, but this is the territory you start getting in when you start depicting other places, right? Like in which I'm not going to blame somebody who looks at that and goes like, "Oh, of course, the one character from here is then depicted this." Like that is a pretty rational like response, and especially in a show that otherwise is depicting a very certain type of person. Like I think the criticisms of this show and how it has depicted folks from other regions, cultures, societies is fair. And then it's just a question of, does that become an ongoing problem like for the characters in these regions? I don't know. So I think you and I are giving the show a lot of good faith interpretation, but I don't blame anybody for looking at that and going like, of course that's how the show would do this. And I think that is a not unfair criticism based on the larger work from Hollywood and its ilk.
I mean, agreed with you that it's fair for anyone to take that in a negative way. But I also think it really fits in with his. I guess he is suspicious of the hive, and if we take the hive,
I think you
to
just
represent,
say he is suspicious. He's that kind of guy. Like, I think, but absent of the hive, I'm not sure that this guy was the life of the party. You know what I mean?
Right. And if we interpret the hive to represent modernity in some way, or like the oncoming advent of AI in some way, right? Like there's something compelling about the idea that this guy has no new technology, and he's like facing off against the hive with old shit. So anyway, who knows how far that analogy is gonna go. On that note, though, Lily G writes into decodingtv@gmail.com. I grew up in Hong Kong and moved to the US as an adult. Now, I should say Lily G is writing in response to our questions about do people in collectivist societies or where there's more shared responsibility about things, do they view the show differently than Americans? And Lily G writes, to be honest, I'm pretty offended that the show depicted all the Asian survivors from Mongolia, China, and India as people from this collectivist culture and do not for 1 second worry about the loss of individuality. Remember, most of us don't think communist is a good idea, where there is no freedom of speech, press, and expressions like the arts. At least for me, I have felt sympathetic to Carol from the start. The show handled the meetings with the other survivors horribly. Even if they all find Carol abrasive and self-aggrandizing, there would at least be 1 or 2 people with similar points of view as Carol, with perhaps different ideas of how to approach or reverse this new world order. I am most irritated that Lakshmi, an Indian woman, is annoying and pushy. Not that Asian women cannot do that, but can we not pick a woman with darker skin to be the angriest? Moreover, as a mother, if my own child turns into this bland, calm kid who knows everything instead of the moody, funny, smart, but also silly girl I came to love, I would be devastated. So their swift compliance with the hive mind might just be trying to save their families' lives, but to not question it made no sense to me at all. Importantly, why has no one pointed out that the alien invasion is the shittiest ever and is not even close to saving humanity? Because what is being human? Is it just to not beat each other up and coexist peacefully? To me, as a musician and a humanist, being human is so much more than that. I'm surprised that both of you, David and Patrick, both writers, have not pointed out that there is no more new entertainment like TV shows, books, and films, because everyone knows all the work that ever existed and there's no need for new creativity to happen. Humans now exist just to exist. What a horrible, boring world. There are no games, no need for any sports competition, no magic, no intrigue, and no privacy. Can you imagine the whole world knowing all your business? Not to mention, how about all the atrocities such as racial oppression? There would never be any justice. All diversity is flattened, and we are just one big, boring, pathetic organism. Boo. I am with Carol because she is right to be angry. The aliens did not ask for our consent, wiped out 10% of the world's population, took away all that's interesting about human beings, and have no backup plans. No idea how to even keep us from starving, and then they are hypocritical enough to not kill fruits? Excuse my French, but fuck them. I was pretty pissed to see Carol clamoring for Zosia because honestly, every survivor except for Manusos has Stockholm Syndrome now.
Yep.
Finally, I would like to say that this show is not slow. I watched the show with my 9-year-old and my husband. Not once did my daughter say it is boring. People are so overstimulated and watch too much plot-driven stuff these days anyway. We are still fans of Vince Gilligan. I just don't think he handled the people of color stuff well, end quote. All right, scathing, Patrick.
Shout out to your 9-year-old for having the. I'm sorry, like that's. I don't know if it's necessary. I necessarily take one 9-year-old watching this show as like I think all 9-year-olds should be able to handle the slow pacing of Pluribus. I don't know if that's true, but I agree with pretty much every other point.
That said, I thought the email was excellent and
yes.
Great points. Where we talked a little earlier about like no art and that being a consequence. But yeah, what does it mean to be human, right? And does being human inherently involve struggle or conflict or pain, right? Does it involve individuality? These are the questions the show is asking. And I think it's a very reasonable reaction that Lily has to what's going on with the joining, which is like all the individuality is gone. All of humanity in essentially doesn't exist anymore. And that is bad. I mean, we get some things out of it. But also there's a lot of bad things. So any other reaction to Lily's email?
No, other than I nodded my head the entire time.
Yeah. Patrick, I wanted to do this thing where we do a sympathy meter for the Hive or Carol, right? And we didn't do it last week, sadly. But I would say the sympathy meter for the Hive last week was extremely high because Carol wanted to reunite with the Hive last week. How about this week? Who do you think is winning this week? Is it Carol or the Hive? And by the way, we might need to reestablish the goalposts. It might need to be like Manusos versus the Hive.
Once if the season finale introduces him as we expect as a main character, we'll have to add that to the tally. No, I'm deeply sympathetic to Carol like this week.
Oh,
like,
really?
I think how would you not have Stockholm Syndrome? Like I think struggling between the two worlds of feeling like literally the weight of the world is on your shoulders. There's no one else. We know that help is coming. We know that there is another person in this world that wants to achieve the same goals as her, but she does not know that. And that's just an enormous weight to sit on someone for now several months. And so I'm with Carol. I'm almost always with Carol, honestly.
Yeah.
Like I'm with the last letter, like fuck the Hive. Like I'm sorry. Like you're not getting much sympathy from me.
Wow.
Across this
I would say my sympathy meter for the Hive is very high this week. I think because they've been able to establish an equilibrium with Carol that seems to meet some of her needs. So and that's worthy of some sympathy
for the abuser. That's what David is saying.
Wow.
That's what David is saying.
Okay.
Hey everyone, David Chen here. Thank you so much for watching that video from Decoding TV. If you want to get an audio version of the show, all you got to do is go to podcast.decodingtv.com. And if you want to support what we do, get ad-free episodes of the podcast and also bonus episodes of the podcast, go to decodingtv.com and become a paid member. Of course, you can also like and subscribe for more. We appreciate it. Thanks. See you later.